on the morning of my son's wedding, a day I had been anticipating with a flutter of nervous joy for months, I woke up to a violation. For a long, suspended moment, adrift in the soft gray light that filtered through my bedroom blinds, I believed I was trapped in the dregs of a terrible nightmare. The feeling was surreal, a phantom horror that clung to the edges of my consciousness. It was the specific kind of bad dream that feels so real you can't quite shake it off, even as your mind slowly registers the familiar comfort of your own bed, the scent of lavender from the sachet on your nightstand, the gentle hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen down the hall. Everything was normal, except it wasn't. My hand lifted, moving on instinct toward my head. It was a gesture I had performed every morning for decades. A simple, unconscious motion to smooth the silver waves of hair I had always taken such quiet pride in. I'd spent a small fortune over the past few weeks, indulging in conditioning treatments and professional styling, all in preparation for this one single day. I had wanted to look my best, to be a mother of the groom who looked radiant and proud, not one who had let herself fade into the background of her own life. But my palm did not meet the soft, familiar texture of my hair. Instead, my fingers grazed against something utterly alien. Bare scalp, shockingly exposed and rough with the sharp, cruel bristle of stubble. A cold dread, sharp and immediate, washed over me. I threw back the covers, my heart hammering against my ribs with a frantic rhythm. The room felt tilted, unsteady beneath my feet as I stumbled into the attached bathroom. I flicked on the light, my eyes squinting against the sudden brightness, and then I saw it. The mirror, my own unforgiving reflection, confirmed the nightmare was real. 67 years. I had lived 67 years on this earth, and in that single horrifying moment, staring at the stranger looking back at me, I had never felt more fragile, more utterly and completely vulnerable. My hair was gone, not just messy or slept on strangely, but butchered, hacked away in jagged, uneven patches that clung desperately to my scalp like terrified survivors of a massacre. It was as if someone had taken a pair of household scissors, or perhaps something even worse, and sheared it all off while I slept. Defenseless in my own home, my reflection stared back, a hollow-eyed woman I barely recognized, her face pale and etched with disbelief. "Isabel," I whispered, the name cracking in my throat. It had to be her, a certainty so absolute it felt like a physical blow settled deep in my gut, forcing the air from my lungs. My daughter-in-law. Sometime in the dead of night she had crept into my room, into my private space, and had done this to me. The realization was a wave of nausea that doubled me over. The cool porcelain of the bathroom sink, the careful preparations, the excitement I had allowed myself to feel, the simple desire to feel beautiful for my son, Leo, on his wedding day. All of it was annihilated in a single act of breathtaking malice. My hands trembled so violently I could barely hold my phone as I scrolled to find Leo's number. "Leo, I need you. You have to come over immediately," I choked out the moment he answered. A weary sigh came through the receiver. "Mom, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. What's wrong?" "The wedding isn't until 2, he continued, his tone already laced with the familiar edge of impatience I had grown to dread over these last few years. "Your wife," she cut off my hair. The words were broken, shredded things, barely audible even to my own ear. A long, heavy silence stretched between us, thick with his disbelief. I could almost picture him, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, annoyed at this pre-dawn intrusion into the most important day of his life. When he finally spoke, his voice was cautious, wary. "What are you talking about, Mom? That doesn't make any sense. She came into my room last night. After I was asleep, she cut off all my hair. Leo, I'm bald." My voice broke on the last word, the full weight of the violation hitting me all over again. Another pause, this one even longer, more calculating. "Mom, that sounds... Are you sure you didn't have some kind of episode? Maybe you should sit down." The suggestion was so dismissive, so insulting, that it felt like another assault. "I am not having an episode." The words exploded out of me, raw with a desperation he couldn't seem to comprehend. The accusation was wild, I knew it was, but it was the truth. Your wife attacked me in my sleep. He promised he would come, but his tone was filled with the weary resignation of a man humoring a difficult, confused parent. I knew then, even before he arrived, that he didn't believe me. Standing there, shivering in the cold bathroom, I felt a deeper, more profound loss than just my hair. I was losing my son, and the most painful part was realizing it had been happening for a very long time. An hour later, which felt like a lifetime spent pacing the cold tiles of my kitchen floor, I heard a car pull into the driveway. When Leo finally arrived, Isabel was with him. Of course, she was. She wouldn't have missed this for the world. She swept into my home not with the hesitation of a guest, but with the breezy, unearned confidence of someone who believed she owned the place. Her blonde hair, a perfect cascade of professionally styled waves, caught the morning sun that streamed through my kitchen window, creating a halo effect that felt like a deliberate mockery. She was the very picture of bridal radiance. "Oh my goodness, Eleanor," she exclaimed, her hand flying to her mouth in a gesture of flawless manufactured horror. Her eyes, wide and searching, scanned my head. "What on earth happened to your hair?" The performance was so immaculate, so perfectly pitched, that for a fleeting second I almost faltered. If I did not know the chilling truth of what she was capable of, I might have believed her concern was genuine. But I did know. I could feel it in the raw, exposed skin of my scalp. "You know exactly what happened," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady, a small miracle in the churning chaos of my emotions. Isabel's eyes widened further, a theatrical display of wounded innocence. She turned to my son, her lower lip trembling just so. "Leo, what does she mean? Your mother is accusing me of something just terrible." My son, my dear Leo, looked between the two of us, his face a miserable mask of frustration and exhaustion. At 35 he had inherited his father's kind eyes, but also a passivity that I now saw as a profound weakness. He had my stubborn streak, yes, but none of the crucial backbone required to stand up to the beautiful, manipulative woman he had chosen to marry. "Mom, this is crazy," he said, shaking his head. "Isabel was with me all night long. We stayed at the hotel after the rehearsal dinner. Remember? She could have come here after you fell asleep," I countered, my gaze locked on my daughter-in-law, searching for even the smallest crack in her pristine facade. She met my stare with unwavering, cool gray eyes. "Why would she do something like that?" Leo's voice held that patronizing tone, the one he had developed over the past 3 years, ever since Isabel had sunk her perfectly manicured claws into his heart and mind. It was the voice he used when he thought I was being irrational, a tone that treated me not as his mother, but as a problem to be managed. I kept my eyes on Isabel, because her mother was worried about the wedding photos, I said, laying the truth bare in the tense air of my kitchen. Because Genevieve didn't want the groom's mother looking better than her. Isabel gasped, a sharp, theatrical intake of breath, and pressed a hand to her chest, as if I had physically struck her. "Eleanor, how could you say such a truly horrible thing? I would never do that. You told me yourself last week." I pushed on, refusing to let her play the victim. "You said Genevieve was nervous, that she was worried about looking old next to me. I was just making conversation." Isabel's voice rose to the perfect pitch of wounded defensiveness. "I cannot believe you would twist my words and use them to build such a paranoid fantasy. This is unbelievable." Leo moved then, stepping closer to his fiancée, and sliding a protective arm around her waist. The gesture, so simple and so swift, sent a shard of ice straight through my heart. It was a clear and devastating declaration of his allegiance. "Mom, you need to apologize to Isabel," he said, his voice firm. "Right now." "Apologize?" The word was a faint whisper, a ghost of a sound. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I had raised by myself. "Leo, look at me," I pleaded. "Please, just really look at what she did to me." For a brief, agonizing moment, his eyes flickered to my scalp, to the butchered remains of my hair. I saw a flash of something in his gaze, a hint of shock or maybe even pity, but he looked away just as quickly, unable to hold the image. "Maybe you should see a doctor," he mumbled, staring at a spot on the wall behind me. "Hair loss can be a symptom of extreme stress." "It didn't fall out, Leo," It was cut. "You're being paranoid, Mom," he snapped, his patience finally breaking. "And frankly, this is embarrassing. Embarrassing." The word landed in my stomach like a heavy cold stone. My pain, my violation, my humiliation, was an embarrassment to my own son. Isabel, sensing her victory, moved closer to Leo, her voice becoming soft and deceptively reasonable. "Maybe we should postpone the wedding," she suggested, looking at me with deep, false concern. "You know, just to give Eleanor some time to get the help she needs." "No," the word burst from me with a force that surprised us all. "Don't you dare use what you did to me as an excuse to postpone this wedding." "What I allegedly did," Isabel corrected, a faint triumphant smile playing on her lips. I stared at Leo, searching his face for any trace of the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the boy whose entire world I once was. "You really believe her over me?" "I believe what makes sense, Mom," he said, his voice flat, "and this just doesn't make any sense." The silence that followed felt like a judgment, like a door slamming shut on 35 years of my life. Standing there in my own kitchen, seeing my distorted bald reflection in the shiny chrome of the toaster, I realized something had fundamentally and irrevocably shifted between us. I was no longer Leo's mother in any way that truly mattered. I was an inconvenience, a problem to be solved, a source of embarrassment on his perfect day. "I need to find something to cover my head," I said finally, my voice devoid of all emotion. Isabel's smile brightened instantly. "Oh, I saw a lovely little wig shop when I was downtown last week," she offered, her tone sickeningly helpful, "very affordable." The word affordable hung in the air like a final, deliberate insult coming from a woman who spent more on her monthly hair appointments than I spent on a month's worth of groceries. As they turned to leave, Leo paused at the door. He still wouldn't look at me direct. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "please, just don't make a scene today. This day isn't about you." I could only nod, not trusting myself to speak. The moment the door clicked shut behind them, my legs gave out, and I sank into my favorite armchair. And only then did I let the tears come. They were not tears of sadness, but of hot, furious rage that had been building for 3 long years. He was right. This day wasn't about me. It was painfully, abundantly clear that no day was ever going to be about me again. After the tears subsided, a hollow resolve took their place. I would go to this wedding. I would not give Isabel the satisfaction of my absence. But first, I had to cover my shame. The wig Isabel had so helpfully suggested, the affordable one, became my singular, desperate mission. I drove to 3 different strip mall shops, each one more depressing than the last. The experience was a new circle of hell I hadn't known existed. In each store I was met with walls of synthetic, lifeless hair perched on unnervingly blank mannequin heads. Finally, in a dusty corner of the 3rd shop, I found something that didn't make me look like I was auditioning for a community theater horror movie. It was an auburn bob, a color I hadn't worn in 40 years, and the synthetic fibers itched terribly against my tender scalp. But it was far better than the alternative. It was a mask, and I needed one desperately. Even so, sitting in the chapel, the itchy wig felt foreign and obvious, a glaring announcement of my humiliation under the warm, unforgiving lights. They had placed me in the 3rd row, not the 1st, where the mother of the groom belonged, but 3 rows back. An afterthought. From my seat, I had a perfect view of Genevieve holding court in the front pew. Her own silver hair was a masterpiece of professional styling. Her navy blue dress was exquisitely tailored, and a string of understated pearls graced her neck. She looked elegant, distinguished, and serene. She looked like everything I was supposed to have looked like on my son's wedding day. "Doesn't Genevieve look just wonderful?" A woman I barely knew whispered from the seat beside me. "So incredibly refined." I nodded and forced a smile, the same tight, agreeable smile I had perfected over the past 3 years. It was the smile of a woman trained to never make waves, to always agree, to shrink herself to avoid causing any trouble. The truth was, this profound humiliation hadn't started this morning. It had been building slowly, insidiously, ever since the day Leo had announced his engagement. I simply hadn't been willing to see the full picture. My mind drifted back to that first dinner when Isabel brought her parents to meet me. I had worked for 2 straight days, cleaning my modest home until it sparkled, polishing silver I rarely used, and simmering a pot roast, Leo's favorite meal since he was a boy. When they arrived, Genevieve had walked through my living room with the detached air of a curator touring a museum of poverty. "How quaint," she had remarked, her fingers brushing against the curtains I had sewn myself. "It's so admirable when people make do with what they have." Isabel had let out that high, tinkling laugh that always set my teeth on edge. "Oh, Mom, not everyone can afford a decorator." And Leo, my Leo, had said nothing. He just sat there enjoying my cooking, while his future in-laws took a silent inventory of all the things I was and all the things I lacked. A secret burned in my chest like a hot coal, a truth so potent it felt like a shield. $2 million. That was what my sister Caroline had left me when she passed away 2 years ago. My practical, brilliant older sister, who never married and had no children, had built a small fortune through a successful accounting practice and shrewd, careful investments. "Promise me you won't tell anyone right away." "Eleanor," she'd whispered from her hospital bed, her voice thin but her eyes sharp. "Watch how people treat you when they think you have nothing. That's the only way you'll ever know who really loves you." I had kept that promise. I kept it even as I endured Isabel's casual cruelties and Genevieve's condescending remarks. I kept it even as Leo began to treat me less like his mother and more like a tiresome obligation. The wedding march began, pulling me from my thoughts. I watched my son's face completely transform as Isabel appeared at the end of the aisle. He looked at her as if she were the sunrise, as if she held all the light and goodness in the world. It was the same way he used to look at me, back when he was small and I was his entire universe. After his father died, it had been just the two of us against the world. He was 8 years old, a whirlwind of anger and loss, and I had worked 3 jobs to keep our little family afloat. Nights spent cleaning office buildings, weekends catering for people wealthier than I could imagine, and days doing data entry while he was at school. Every single penny went to his future. But somewhere along the line, the best mom in the world had become the embarrassing mom, who couldn't afford the ski trips or the designer jeans his friends had. I had told myself it was just a phase. He never grew out of it. During the reception, I was relegated to a table in the back of the grand ballroom, near the kitchens, seated with distant cousins and a few old family friends. Isabel had insisted on the seating arrangement, of course, claiming it would be more comfortable for me to be with people my own age. The people my own age, as it turned out, were lovely. Mrs. Albright, Leo's third-grade teacher, greeted me with a warm, genuine hug. "You never missed a single thing, Eleanor," she said, her eyes kind. "Rain or shine, you were always there," cheering him on from the back of the room. "That was a long time ago," I said, my gaze finding Leo as he slow danced with his new wife, whispering in her ear. "Not so long," Mrs. Albright replied gently. "I remember you working a double shift and still showing up to his science fair with cupcakes for the class. That's real love." But real love, I was finally, painfully learning, didn't guarantee respect. When the speeches began, Leo stood and thanked Isabel's parents effusively. He spoke of Genevieve's wisdom and her husband's generous spirit and business advice. He talked about how welcomed they had made him feel. He never mentioned not one single word for the woman who had raised him alone, who had sacrificed everything for his happiness, who was sitting here today wearing a cheap, itchy wig because his wife had wanted to win a silent, ugly competition. The applause felt like a physical blow. I excused myself, desperate for a moment of solitude. In the ladies' room, under the harsh fluorescent lights, the fake auburn hair looked even more garish. The woman staring back at me was a stranger, defeated, invisible, forgotten. But as I reached up to adjust the horrid wig, something else stared back from my own reflection, something I had not seen in years. Anger. It was a pure, clean anger that cut through the deep hurt like a surgeon's blade. I had $2 million sitting in a bank account. I had choice. I had a power they couldn't even begin to imagine. And for the first time in 3 years, I was ready to start using it. I returned from the bathroom with a new cold clarity settled in my bones. The question was no longer whether my family loved me. That felt like a childish concern now. The real question was whether I was finally ready to stop begging them to. The moment that solidified my resolve came, as these things often do, with a piece of cake. I was standing near the dessert table trying to blend in with the floral arrangements, when the sound of Isabel's laughter, high and sharp, rang out across the reception hall. She was holding court near the head table, regaling a captivated group of wedding guests with what was clearly a hilarious story, her voice carrying that particular saccharine tone that made my skin crawl, rose just enough to be heard over the murmur of the crowd. "Oh, you should have seen her this morning," Isabel was saying, dabbing at her eyes with a delicate finger as if wiping away tears of mirth. Leo's poor mother was absolutely convinced that I had snuck into her house in the middle of the night and cut off all her hair while she slept. The group around her erupted in a wave of shocked laughter. Someone gasped audibly, "Are you serious? She actually accused you of that? My goodness." Isabel pressed her hand over her heart in a gesture of profound mock distress. "The poor thing is just getting so paranoid. Honestly, we're all really worried about her mental state." I felt the blood drain from my face. My breath caught in my chest. She was actually doing this, standing there in a room full of people I had known for years, friends and neighbors who had watched me raise my son, and she was painting me as a delusional old woman. Her mother, Genevieve, chose that moment to chime in, shaking her perfectly coiffed head with a sigh of deep concern. "Age can be so cruel," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "Some people just can't handle getting older gracefully." "Exactly," Isabel agreed, her voice laced with the most poisonous brand of false sympathy. "We have been trying to be so patient, but honestly, it's becoming a real burden on Leo. He is far too sweet to ever say anything. Of course, but I can see how much stress his mother's recent behavior is causing him." Miss Albright, who had been standing near me, selecting a slice of lemon tart, gasped softly. "That's just terrible," she whispered, looking at me with genuine alarm. "How can she say such things about you?" But I was frozen, watching this woman, my son's wife, systematically and gleefully assassinate my character. She was rewriting my history, turning decades of sacrifice into a narrative of senile paranoia. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that was expertly calculated to carry even further. "We've actually been discussing it," she confided to the group. "We think it might be time for Eleanor to consider, assisted living. Somewhere she can get the round-the-clock care she clearly needs." Assisted living. The words hit me with the force of a physical slap. My God, was there no bottom to her cruelty? One of the guests nodded sagely. "That's probably for the best. My aunt went through the same thing. Started making wild accusations, forgetting things. It was just so hard on the family. I couldn't breathe. This calculating woman was turning my very existence into a problem that needed to be managed, a burden that needed to be solved and put away. And where was my son during this public execution of his mother's dignity? He was laughing with his groomsmen not 20 feet away, completely oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant, that his wife was destroying me one vicious lie at a time. "Eleanor, are you all right?" Miss Albright touched my arm gently. "You look terribly pale." Before I could form a response, Isabel's voice rose again, bright and cheerful. "Oh, there she is now. Eleanor." She waved me over with that brilliant, empty smile that never ever reached her eyes. "We were just talking about you." I walked toward them on legs that felt like water. The entire group turned to look at me and I could see it instantly in their faces. A mixture of pity and deep discomfort. They were looking at me the way you look at someone who has tragically lost their mind. "Isabel was just telling us about your difficult morning." One of the women said gently, her tone the one you'd use with a confused and frightened child. "How are you feeling now, dear?" The question was so loaded with condescension, so deeply insulting that it took all my strength to answer. "I'm fine," I managed to say. "Of course you are," Isabel said, stepping closer and placing her hand on my arm in a gesture that looked supportive to them, but to me felt as possessive as a handcuff. "We are all here for you, Eleanor. That's what family is for." The word family tasted like acid in my mouth. She continued, her voice taking on that bright, helpful tone again. "Actually, Leo and I have been talking. and we think it might be time for you to step back a little. You know, to really focus on yourself. Maybe it's time to retire from trying to manage everyone else's life." The group murmured their soft agreement, as if I were some meddling, interfering shrew instead of a woman who had asked for nothing in return for a lifetime of devotion. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Well," Isabel said, glancing around for support from her audience, "we just think you should find your own path. Maybe stop depending so much on Leo for your social life and all of your emotional needs." The accusation was so breathtakingly wrong, so completely backward, that I almost laughed out loud. I hadn't depended on Leo for anything in years. If anything, he was the one who still called me for advice on bills, for help when his car broke down, for a sympathetic ear when he and Isabel had their fights. "You think I depend on my son?" "Oh, sweetie," Genevieve interjected, her voice syrupy with false kindness. "It is so common for widowed mothers to become overly attached. It's not your fault, dear, but it isn't healthy." "Exactly," Isabel chimed in, warming to her theme. "Leo needs the space to build his own family now. It's simply not fair to burden him with constant drama and bizarre accusations." That word again. Burden. After everything I had sacrificed. After everything I had given up. I was a burden. "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding," I said, and I felt my voice growing stronger, fueled by the pure, clean anger from the bathroom. "I never accused anyone of anything that was not true." Isabel's smile faltered for the briefest of moments, a tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the mask. But it was back in an instant, brighter than ever. "Of course, dear. But you must understand how it sounded. How it made poor Leo feel." "Bizarre?" I asked, my voice louder than I intended, causing a few nearby heads to turn. "Eleanor," Genevieve said firmly, her tone shifting to one of sharp rebuke, "you are making a scene. Making a scene. For defending myself." I looked around at the faces of people I had known for decades, and saw only pity and doubt. They believed every single word of her carefully crafted, poisonous narrative. I took a deep breath. "You're right," I said finally, my voice calm and clear. "I believe it is time for me to step back." Isabel's smile was purely triumphant. "I am so glad you understand, Eleanor. We all just want what's best for everyone." What was best for everyone? Everyone except for me. "Excuse me?" I said politely to the group. I turned and walked away, my head held high. I didn't look back as I walked through the grand ballroom, past the dance floor, and straight out to the parking lot, the ridiculous wig sliding slightly on my head. I could hear the music and laughter carrying on behind me, as if nothing had happened, as if I had never been there at all. But I was there, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. Sitting in my car in the fading afternoon light, I finally yanked the horrible itchy wig from my head and tossed it onto the passenger seat. My scalp, tender and exposed, prickled in the humid air behind me. The muffled sounds of music and laughter drifted from the reception hall, a party continuing on as if a central gear had not just been broken and discarded. It was as if I had never been there at all. In the quiet solitude of the car, staring at my ghostly reflection in the rearview mirror, I made a decision. A calm, cold, and absolute decision. Isabel was right about one thing. It was time for me to step back, but I would be doing it on my own terms, and not in any way she could have ever imagined. The following Monday morning, I walked into the offices of Arthur Vance. The air inside smelled of old leather, lemon polish, and the quiet authority of money. Miss Vance had been my sister Caroline's attorney for 15 years, a man of immense discretion and competence. When I had called his office first thing that morning, his secretary fit me in immediately. No questions asked. I sat across from his vast mahogany desk, wearing my best dress, the elegant blue one I had purchased to be the mother of the groom, an outfit that now felt like a costume from a different life. "Of course, Mrs. Patterson," he said, his expression professionally neutral after I stated my purpose. "What kind of changes were you considering for your will?" I slid a thick manila folder across the polished desk. I had spent the entire weekend preparing it with methodical precision. Inside were copies of everything. My original will, which left my entire modest estate to Leo. The bank statements clearly showing the $2 million inheritance from Caroline, and a new plan drafted in my own careful, steady handwriting. I want to remove my son, Leo Patterson, as my beneficiary, I stated calmly. Arthur Vance's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, the only sign of his surprise. That is certainly your right, he said, picking up a pen. May I ask what has prompted this significant decision? A dozen bitter answers flooded my mind, but I chose the simplest, cleanest truth. Let's just say my family has made it abundantly clear that they do not value my presence in their lives. I am merely adjusting my affairs to reflect that reality. He nodded slowly, making a note on a legal pad. His face was unreadable. I see. And who would you like to designate as your new beneficiary? I want to establish a scholarship fund, I said, the words feeling more right than anything I had said in years. I had spent 3 long sleepless nights thinking this through. A fund for single mothers who are pursuing nursing degrees. The irony was not lost on me. For 12 years, being a nurse's aide had been one of my 3 jobs, the one that had been the most rewarding and the most heartbreaking. It was good, honest work, and I had always carried a quiet regret that I never had the time or the money to get my own RN degree. That's a lovely legacy, Emma, Mr. Vance said, a hint of warmth entering his voice. We can absolutely arrange that. Will there be any other provision for any other family members? None, I said, the word leaving no room for negotiation. He made another note, then looked at me over the top of his spectacles. Mrs. Patterson, forgive me for asking, but it is my duty. Is this decision being made under any kind of duress? Are you feeling pressured by anyone? I almost let out a laugh. It was a strange, foreign sound I hadn't felt in days. Mr. Vance, I said, if anything, for the first time in a very long time, I am finally free from pressure. This isn't duress. This is clarity. My next appointment was harder. I drove to Summit Realty, the office where Helen Pierce had worked for more than 20 years. Helen had sold me my little house when Leo was just 10 years old, a safe harbor after his father's death. I trusted her. Emma, she greeted me with her usual warm smile as I walked in. How was the wedding? I heard it was just beautiful. Beautiful. Yes, I suppose it was. If you could ignore the systematic character assassination and public humiliation, it was a lovely affair. It was something, I said, forcing a small smile of my own. Helen, I need to talk to you about selling my house. Her smile faltered instantly. Selling? Are you serious? But you love that little house, all the work you've put into it. The garden. I had loved every square inch of it. I had poured my life into that small 2-bedroom home. I saw a ghost of myself in every room, planting the rose bushes in the front yard, renovating the kitchen penny by penny, sitting at the dining room table late at night with my own paperwork while Leo did his homework beside me. The house wasn't just wood and nails, it was a museum of my sacrifices. I'm ready for a change, I said simply. Well, the market is certainly hot right now, she conceded, shifting into professional mode. Are you looking to downsize? There are some lovely new senior communities just north of town. Actually, I took a deep breath. I'm thinking of moving out of state. Helen blinked, genuinely shocked. Out of state? Emma, where would you go? Denver, I said. My cousin Celia lives in Colorado. She has been asking me to come visit for years. It was true. My cousin Celia and I had always stayed in touch. When I had finally broken down and called her Sunday night, overwhelmed by the events of the wedding, she had been thrilled to hear from me, her voice a balm of unconditional support. You should come for an extended visit, she had insisted. I have a wonderful community of friends here, active seniors, book clubs, hiking groups. You would love it, Emma. I might need to make it a permanent move, Celia, I had confessed. Even better, she'd replied without a moment's hesitation. I have a guest room that is yours for as long as you need it. Helen was still staring at me, her brow furrowed with concern. Emma, this all seems very sudden. Are you sure you are not making this decision too quickly? Perhaps you should talk to Leo first. I looked at my old friend, the woman who had helped me buy the very home I was now selling, the home where I had raised my son. Leo and his new wife made it quite clear at the wedding. That they think I need to find my own path and stop depending on them, I said, my voice even and calm. I'm simply taking their advice. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved with the quiet, focused efficiency of a woman on a mission. There was a strange liberation in dismantling the life I had so carefully curated. I donated most of my furniture to a local charity that helped families get back on their feet, keeping only the pieces that held true personal meaning for me. I packed my mother's hand-painted china, my sister Caroline's simple gold jewelry, and the heavy photo albums that documented Leo's entire childhood, from his first bath to his college graduation. I worked in silence, a ghost in my own home. I did not tell anyone what I was doing. Not Leo, not my neighbors, not the women from my book club. I simply went about my business, methodically tying up the loose ends of my old life, a skill I had perfected from decades of managing one crisis after another entirely on my own. The most difficult part by far was the storage unit. I rented a small, climate-controlled space across town and began the heart-wrenching task of packing up Leo's childhood. I filled box after box with his memories, which felt so tangled up with my own. His elementary school report cards, full of praise for his bright mind, his clumsy art projects, which I had always treated like masterpieces. I carefully wrapped the clay pinch pot he made me for Mother's Day, in 2nd grade. I packed away the handmade cards, drawn with construction paper and crayons, that I had saved for all these years. One of them, written in his 6-year-old scrawl, read, "You're the best mom ever. I love you to the moon and back." I placed it gently in a box on top of his first pair of shoes, my hands steady but my heart aching. I packed it all away, not for me, but just in case. Just in case someday he wanted to remember the woman I used to be to him. The phone calls started about 2 weeks after the wedding. The first was from Leo, his voice carrying a slightly guilty, hesitant tone that told me Isabel had likely made a comment about him, neglecting his poor, lonely mother. "Hey, Mom," he began awkwardly. "Just, wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, my voice even and light. "How is married life treating you?" "Oh, it's great. Great. Isabel is just amazing. We're really happy." "I'm glad to hear that," I said, and to my surprise I found that I meant it. His happiness was all I had ever wanted, even if the path to it had caused me so much pain. "So, are you doing anything fun?" he asked. "Getting out at all?" The question was loaded with the heavy subtext of our last conversation at the reception. Was I following their advice? Was I building my own life? Was I learning to be less dependent, less of a burden? "Actually, yes," I replied, looking around at the stacks of boxes that represented my future. "I have been quite busy." "Oh, good. That's great to hear. What kind of stuff?" "Just taking care of some things I have been putting off for a long time." It was not a lie. I had been putting off living my own life for nearly 35 years. The second call came, a week later, the day the for sale sign went up in my front yard. Helen must have mentioned it to someone who knew Isabel, because Leo's voice was sharp with confusion and alarm when he called. What is this I'm hearing? About you selling the house." "Helen Pierce's office called Isabel and said you'd listed the property." Of course they had called Isabel. She had successfully positioned herself as the new family gatekeeper. "I'm making some changes in my life, Leo," I said calmly. "What kind of changes?" "You didn't say a single word about selling the house." "You're right, I didn't." I agree. "I'm learning to make my own decisions without feeling the need to burden you with all the details." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Burdening me? Mom, what are you talking about?" "Isabel made it quite clear at your wedding that I needed to stop depending on you and find my own path," I reminded him gently. "I'm doing exactly that. I thought you would both be pleased." "I think there has been a huge misunderstanding," he stammered. "No, I don't think there was a misunderstanding at all," I interrupted, my voice still soft but firm. I heard her quite clearly, and you know what? She was right. It is past time for me to build my own life. But selling the house? That seems so extreme. "Where are you going to live?" "I have options," I said, leaving the statement to hang in the air. Another long pause stretched between us. Mom? You're worrying me now. This doesn't sound like you at all. He was right. This was not like me. The old me, the woman he knew, would have asked his permission. She would have sought his approval and made sure any change to her life fit conveniently into his. But the old me had foolishly believed that a lifetime of love and sacrifice would be rewarded with basic respect and consideration. The old me had been wrong about a great many things. I'm fine, Leo. Actually, I am better than fine, I said, and the truth of it resonated deep inside me. I'm excited about this new chapter. New chapter. Mom, what aren't you telling me? Everything, I thought. I am not telling you that your wife is a cruel and manipulative woman. I am not telling you that your wedding day was the single most humiliating day of my life. I am not telling you that I have enough money to disappear from your life forever if I so choose. But I said none of that. Instead, I used their own words as my shield. I am not telling you anything, sweetheart, because you don't need to be burdened with managing my life, I said. Isn't that what you wanted? The call ended with his vague, confused promises to talk again soon. I could hear the bewildered frustration in his voice. Good. Let him wonder. Let him spend some time questioning whether he really knew his own mother at all. Because the truth was, I was only just beginning to get to know myself. They showed up on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the for sale sign had gone up. I was in the kitchen, carefully wrapping my mother's china in padded paper, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in my front door lock. Leo's key. Of course. He still had a key. I had given it to him on his 16th birthday, a symbol of trust and of his growing independence. It had never once occurred to me, even after everything, to ask for it back. It was a relic of a time when I believed our bond was unbreakable. Mom, he called out from the entryway. We need to talk. My stomach tightened into a cold, hard knot as I heard Isabel's voice float down the hallway. Emma, where are you? My goodness, what is all this? I carefully dried my hands on a dish towel and walked into the living room. I found them standing there, surrounded by my packed and labeled boxes, looking completely out of place, like hostile invaders surveying newly conquered territory. Isabel was dressed in her typical, effortless perfection. She wore a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly utility bills, designer jeans, and a pair of ridiculously expensive boots she frequently showcased on her social media. Hello, Leo. Isabel, I said, keeping my voice perfectly neutral. What brings you by unannounced? What brings us by? Leo gestured wildly at the stacks of boxes that filled the room. Mom, this is insane. You cannot just sell your house and disappear without talking to us. I am not disappearing, Leo. I am moving. Where? Isabel stepped forward, her features arranged into a mask of sweet concern that made my skin crawl. We're worried about you, Emma. This kind of impulsive behavior, it really isn't like you at all. Impulsive? The word was a calculated jab, meant to paint me as unstable, as if I had not spent every waking moment of the last 3 weeks carefully, meticulously, planning every single detail of my departure. I am moving to Denver, I said, to be near my cousin Celia. Leo frowned. Celia? I barely even remember her. You haven't spoken to her in years. We've stayed in touch more than you know, I replied smoothly. But why Denver? Isabel pressed, her voice sharp with something that sounded less like concern and more like frustration. It's so far away. And with your episodes? Don't you think you should stay closer to family? There was that word again. Episodes, designed to gently, persistently label me as unreliable. I do not have episodes, Isabel. Well, no, of course not, she backtracked quickly. I just meant, all the confusion around the wedding. The strange accusation. Leo shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. Mom? About that? About what, Leo? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. About your wife sneaking into my home and hacking off my hair. Or about her telling a crowd of our friends and family that I was losing my mind. Even Isabel's perfectly applied makeup could not hide the brief flash of panic in her eyes. I never said you were losing your mind, she insisted. I was just concerned about you. That is, you told a group of people that I needed to be put in an assisted living facility, I stated, the fact hanging in the air between us, undeniable. That's not. I think you misunderstood the conversation, she finished weakly. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. I moved to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photograph of Leo on his college graduation day, me beaming proudly beside him. I understand that you see me as a problem that needs to be managed, a burden on your new marriage. Mom, that is not true, Leo said. But his voice was weak and lacked all conviction. Isn't it? I turned to face them both, the photograph still in my hands. When was the last time you called me just to talk, Leo? Not because you needed something. Not because Isabel reminded you to check on your poor lonely mother. But just because you actually wanted to hear my voice. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to answer. Exactly, I said softly, and I gently placed the photograph into an open box. You have both made it crystal clear that I am no longer welcome in your life as anything more than a tiresome obligation. So, I am removing that obligation. You're being dramatic, Isabel snapped, her voice sharpening as her composure began to crack. We never said you weren't welcome. You told me to find my own path and to stop depending on Leo, I reminded her. I am doing exactly what you suggest. I meant you should find hobbies, she retorted, her frustration boiling over. Join a book club, take up gardening, not sell your home and run away to another state like some kind of rebellious teenager. I am 67 years old, Isabel. I do not need your permission to make decisions about my own life. I set down the box and faced her directly. You know what isn't healthy? 35 years of putting my son's needs before my own, only to be treated like an embarrassment at his wedding. 35 years of working multiple jobs so he could have opportunities I never even dreamed of, only to be told I am a burden on his new marriage. 35 years of love and devotion, only to discover that it means nothing compared to 3 years of manipulation from a woman who sees me as competition. I do not see you as competition, Isabel spat, but her voice was defensive and brittle. Don't you? Then why did you need to destroy my appearance on your wedding day? Why did you need to humiliate me and make sure everyone saw me as the crazy possessive mother-in-law? Her mask shattered completely then, revealing the ugly truth beneath. Because you are the crazy mother-in-law, she yelled. You are possessive and you are jealous, and you cannot stand the fact that Leo doesn't need you anymore. The truth of her feelings, raw and venomous, hung in the air between us. There it is, I said softly. Finally. Leo stared at his wife, his face a picture of shock. Isabel, what the hell? Oh, don't you dare act surprised, she snapped, turning on him. You complain about her to me constantly, about how she calls too much, how she still treats you like you're 12, how she makes everything about her sacrifice. Her next words broke something deep inside me. You have said all of it, Leo. Every time she does something that annoys you, you come home and you vent to me for an hour. You were just too much of a coward to ever say it to her face. It wasn't my heart that broke, that had been breaking slowly for years. This was something deeper, the final essential thread that connected me to the son I thought I knew. I see, I said quietly. Leo's face crumpled. Mom! I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, I said, surprised by how steady my hands were as I sealed the box containing his photo. But you know what? It's all right. I accept it now. I looked at my son, who could not meet my gaze, and at his wife, who was practically vibrating with vindicated rage. For 35 years, you were the center of my universe, and I couldn't accept that I wasn't the center of yours anymore. But I do. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. So here is what is going to happen. I am moving to Denver next week. I am going to start a new life, with people who actually want me around. And you two can have your perfect little family without the burden of dealing with me. I think you should leave now. For a long moment they just stood there. Then Isabel grabbed Leo's arm, pulling him toward the door. Fine, she snarled. But don't expect us to come running when you realize what a terrible mistake you've made. After they were gone, I closed the door and leaned against it. I sat down on a packed box in the middle of my dismantled living room, and felt something I had not experienced in decades. Pure, unadulterated relief. The worst had happened. The pretending was finally over. And I was still here. I was still breathing. In fact, for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I could finally breathe freely. 6 months after I closed the door on my old life, I was standing in the bright, airy kitchen of my new apartment in Denver, watching a soft morning snow paint the city in shades of white and gray. My hair, which had grown back silver and surprisingly soft, was cut in a stylish pixie that I loved. It had been touched by no one except my new hairdresser, a kind woman who talked about her grandchildren and never asked a single intrusive question about my past. My cousin Celia had been right about the community here. With her gentle encouragement, I had bloomed. Within a month of arriving, I had joined a spirited hiking group for active seniors, a book club that met weekly at a cozy local coffee shop, and a volunteer program reading to children at the local hospital. For the first time in my entire adult life, I was living solely and completely for myself. My days were full, my schedule was my own, and my heart was slowly, quietly healing. A letter from Leo sat on my granite countertop, where it had been since it arrived yesterday, forwarded from my old address. It was his third attempt to make contact since I had left. The first two had been voicemails, one left a month after my departure, and the other a month after that. I had listened to each of them once, his voice full of a confused, pleading hurt, and then I had deleted them without a second thought. I was not ready then, but this morning, with the snow falling and the rich aroma of coffee filling my kitchen, I thought I might be his familiar handwriting, so much like his father's, covered the page. Dear Mom, it began. I have been trying to reach you for months. I know you must be angry, and I know now how deeply we hurt you. I am writing because I need you to know that Isabel and we are having problems. I set the letter down and poured myself a cup of coffee, adding a generous splash of the real cream I never allowed myself when money was a constant worry. Through the large kitchen window, I could see my neighbor, Mrs. Tanaka, refilling her bird feeder, and she gave me a cheerful. She had invited me over for dinner next week, simply because she enjoyed my company. I smiled and waved back before picking up the letter again. She has been different since you left. Colder somehow, more controlling. Yesterday she gave me an ultimatum. She told me I needed to choose, once and for all, between having any kind of relationship with you and staying married to her. She said if I even tried to contact you again, she would know I was choosing you over her. I felt a small bitter smile touch my lips. So Isabel's mask was finally slipping for Leo too. I keep thinking about what she said that day at the house. About me complaining about you. The truth is, Mom, I did say those things. When I was frustrated or tired after a long day, I would vent to her about little things that seemed annoying at the time. But I never, ever meant for her to twist those conversations and use them as ammunition against you. I never thought she would be so cruel. Too little, too late, a voice in my head whispered. But I kept reading. I have been thinking a lot about when I was a kid, right after Dad died. Do you remember that one night when I was 9, and I was terrified there was a monster under my bed? You did not just tell me there was nothing there. You got a big flashlight, and you got down on your hands and knees, and we searched the entire room together. Then you made me a monster spray out of an old bottle, filled with water and a little bit of lavender, and you told me that as long as I had it, no monster could ever hurt me. I remembered. He had been so brave, his little chin trembling as he tried to cry while we searched every dark corner of his room. I realized something, Mom. For my whole life, you were my monster spray. Every time the world felt scary or unfair or cruel, you made it safe again. And instead of being grateful for that protection, I grew up and started to resent you for it. I thought needing you meant I was weak. I never understood that it simply meant I was loved. The words on the page began to blur as tears I hadn't expected filled my eyes. Isabel never had that. Her parents were cold and distant. She doesn't understand that kind of love, so she saw our bond as something strange and unhealthy. And I was weak enough and stupid enough to believe her. I miss you, Mom. I don't just miss you because my marriage is falling apart. I miss you because I finally truly understand what I lost when I chose to believe her over you. I lost the one person in the entire world who loved me unconditionally, the one person who always saw the best in me, even when I did not deserve it. My phone buzzed on the counter, interrupting my thoughts. It was Celia. "Emma, dear," she said brightly. "Are you free for dinner tonight instead of tomorrow? My nephew Richard is visiting from Phoenix, and I thought you two might enjoy meeting. He's a widower about your age and a retired teacher. Loves to read, just like you." I smiled. Celia had been gently trying to set me up with various eligible men since I arrived. She didn't quite understand that after decades of defining myself through other people's needs, I was relishing the simple luxury of answering only to myself. Yet I surprised myself with my answer. "That sounds lovely, Celia," I said. "What time?" After I hung up, I returned to Leo's letter. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I am asking anyway, because I cannot stand the thought of living the rest of my life without my mother." I folded the letter and set it aside. I walked to the small antique desk in the corner of my living room and pulled out a sheet of my own stationery, cream-colored paper, with my new Denver address embossed at the top. "Dear Leo," I wrote, "thank you for your letter. It means more than you can know to hear you acknowledge the mistakes that were made." I paused, thinking carefully about what I wanted to say next. "I need you to understand something. I did not leave because I stopped loving you. I left because loving you in the way I was expected to was destroying me. For too many years I made you the center of my universe while I slowly disappeared. That was not healthy for either of us. I have built a new life here. I have friends who value my company and activities that bring me joy. For the first time, I am living for myself. I will not give that up." I thought about mentioning the money, the inheritance that had made this new freedom possible, but I decided against it. Some secrets were still worth keeping. "If you want to rebuild our relationship, it will have to be on entirely new terms. I will not be the mother who sacrifices her own happiness for her child's. I will not be the on-call grandmother who babysits at a moment's notice, or the emergency contact who drops Terp and you call. But if you want a mother who has found her own strength, who can offer you her love without losing herself in the process, then perhaps in time, we can find a new way forward." I sealed the letter and set it by my purse to mail in the morning. Later that evening, at a quiet Italian restaurant, I found myself sitting across from Richard, a man with kind eyes and a gentle, easy laugh. He asked thoughtful questions about my move, about the books I was reading, and he never once made me feel like I needed to justify the choices I had made. Walking home through the softly falling snow, I felt a lightness in my step I hadn't experienced since I was a young girl. The immense weight of other people's expectations and disappointments was gone. Back in my warm, quiet apartment, I made a cup of tea and sat in my favorite soft blue recliner, looking out at the glittering city lights. Somewhere across the country, Leo would eventually read my letter, and perhaps he would struggle to understand the new woman who had replaced the mother he thought he knew. I hoped he would understand. I hoped he would find the courage to build his own life, based on his own choice. But whether he did or not, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that I would be fine. For the first time in my life, I was enough for myself, and that, I realized, was the most powerful discovery of all. Emma's profound journey from devastating heartbreak to quiet, unshakable empowerment serves as a crucial and deeply resonant lesson for anyone who has ever felt overlooked, disrespected, or taken for granted. Her story is far more than a simple narrative of family drama. It is a powerful testament to the fact that it is never too late to reclaim your own life and redefine your worth on your own terms. For decades, Emma poured her entire identity into her role as a mother, slowly erasing her own needs and desires, until she became a secondary character in her own story. This gradual disappearance of self is what made the shattering betrayal by her son and daughter-in-law so catastrophic. It wasn't just an act of cruelty, it was the final confirmation of her perceived invisibility. However, the story's most vital lesson lies in what happens next. It teaches us that sometimes, the most painful moments of our lives are the necessary catalysts for profound change. Her anger was not just rage, it was the rediscovery of her own voice. Her secret inheritance was not just money, it was the tangible proof that she had options, choices, and a future that she alone could control. This transformation from a victim of circumstance to the architect of her own destiny is the heart of her journey. We learn that true strength isn't about the absence of pain, but about how we respond to it. Emma's comeback was not a single grand act of revenge, but a series of deliberate, courageous steps taken with quiet dignity and unwavering resolve, from changing her will, to selling a house full of memories, to bravely starting over in a new city. She didn't just escape a toxic environment. She actively built a new one, filled with genuine friendships, personal joy, and peace. Her story ultimately teaches us that setting boundaries is the highest form of self-respect, and that our happiness should never be a negotiation. If this powerful story of transformation and the fight for self-worth resonates with you, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Your engagement and support are what enable us to continue finding and sharing these meaningful narratives that remind us of our own strength. We are building a community centered on powerful stories, and we would be honored to have you as a part of. Finally, we are always amazed to see how far these stories travel and connect with people across the globe. Please take a moment to comment below and let us know which region or country you are watching from today.